Hi, it's Aliza Terrace. I'm back, and I want to continue talking to you about what we spoke about last time, which was that health, Briut, is about base, resh, aleph, creation, and it's the creation of order. And that it's our neshama actually that has to do this ordering, that has to do this creation. So we might think, okay, great, we all have a neshama, we understand that it has to be done, we need to make order, we'll be healthy. What's the problem? It's not really its problem, but we do have to understand that we are here in a physical body, and that's the challenge. So we're being pulled different ways. We need to use the neshama to have that health and healing. Like I said before, I'm going to give you over what's been helpful to me as a student of Torah and in my profession. Got lucky to be a psychotherapist, and because of that, I was able to be introduced to more of the inner working of our physical body. And primarily, it's the brain and the embodied nervous, the brain, which is embodied in our nervous system throughout our body. And if we get more of an understanding, it's been my finding that it's still a huge avoda to do. There's no arguing that, at least for me it is. But we have more of a fighting chance because we know in black and white what's going on. So I'm going to begin and hope that it will be helpful to you too, to have an understanding of what one of the teachers of interpersonal neurobiology, in fact, he's the founder, his name is Dan Siegel, and he calls it the handy model of the brain. The reason is because the model is right here in the palm of your hand. So I'm going to invite everybody to put up their hand and join me in looking at a very handy model of the brain. And it's great because it helps us remember it a lot more easily. So if we take our hand and we picture that this is over here, this part of our hand is our brain stem. This is the most basic part of our brain, the brain stem. The brain is divided into three parts practically. And the brain stem is responsible for the automatic functioning of the body. So it automatically controls, for example, our digestion, our temperature, our heart rate. It also is responsible for initiating the fight, flight, freeze response in the body in order to protect the body. That's all the basic brainstem. Now, if you put your thumb and fold it into the middle of your hand, this whole area around the thumb here in the middle is called the limbic system. That's the middle part of our brain. The limbic system is really responsible for creating our emotional memories and for motivation. In the limbic system, specifically what's highlighted is a part of our brain called the amygdala. You might have heard of it. The amygdala is really solely responsible for our fear response. So Hashem designed it that part of our brain is always on the lookout, asking the question, are we safe or is there danger? And it's constantly on and constantly asking that question. And that's going to be very important, which is why I'm saying it again, because in order to understand how we work, we have to understand that this part of the brain is constantly assessing and evaluating our environment for safety and danger. And I have to add, it's not just safety or danger physically, it's safety or danger emotionally. And remember that our emotional memories are stored here. So based on our own history of what has been emotionally safe or threatening, that is what is being used to assess whether in the present we are safe or in fact not, and that there's threat. So that's our middle part of our brain. Now, the next part, the third part of our brain, is if you take your fingers that are still up and fold it over your thumb part of your brain. So here you have the whole brain, and this top part is called the cortex. And the cortex is the part of our brain that really is responsible for our ability to plan, to think. All of the senses in our body in different parts of our brain, whether it's the side for hearing or sight or motor, basically all of the senses give us information through the cortex part of our brain. And then in the very front part is really the part that's called the prefrontal cortex, and it's behind our forehead, right? If you're looking at over here. So part is really behind our forehead, and this part is responsible for our ability to even think abstract thoughts. So to have awareness of awareness, which only human beings and no other creations, no other animals have this ability, that we have this prefrontal cortex. We can actually have an awareness of awareness. We can reflect on our thoughts. We can create, and all this because of this prefrontal cortex. And one gets even better, one step deeper, which is extremely unique to us, which is the middle two fingers, let's say here, would be representative of what's called the middle prefrontal cortex. And in this area they've discovered is where we actually have the ability for specific functions that only human beings have. For example, insight, empathy, the ability to have compassion, the ability to modulate our fear, the ability to stop before we react to something, the ability for morality. All these functions, which I imagine are very important to you, they're very important to me. We value them. This is what we're supposed to be. Actually, when we talk about health and we talk about neshama, these are abilities that the neshama gives us. And so that's right here in this middle prefrontal cortex. So this is another very interesting and important fact to give you over in this Neurobiology 101, is that if you look at the physical location of where this middle prefrontal cortex is, what's unique about it is that if I lift it up, you see it's connected to the limbic system where it is, and it's also connected, like it's right here, connected right next to the brainstem. So it's considered to be the most highly integrative part of the brain, meaning that it is linked to the other parts and therefore very quickly can receive and send messages to the other parts of the brain. So here is our handy model of the brain, and it's going to help us in understanding, number one, how the neshama part of our brain needs to literally override the limbic, the emotional parts of our brain. And remember, that's connected to our I would say response, but really at this level of the brainstem, it's a reaction to protect ourselves, to survive, because that's what the body is designed to do at the most basic level. The body is designed for physical survival. And so when it considers something to be threatening, it is going to right away, the limbic system is going to tell the brainstem to prepare the body for fight, flight, or freeze. And I think we all know what that looks like, whether it's running and increasing our heart rate and the blood flows to our muscles and we can get faster, or we shut down and we just freeze. And all these responses are completely automatic. They have no intention. It happens immediately. So maybe you're starting to realize then that if we're going to lead with our neshama, right, which would be found in these areas, the ability to override the limbic system has to be very present. Our awareness has to be very focused on this override, because there's so much, and depending on who you are and what your history is, remember, everything's recorded in this middle system here in terms of your emotional memory. So what makes one person feel threatened and another person feel threatened are two very different things. But this area does not assess real danger. It assesses perception of danger, and that's based on your history and your history with people, because that's when this part's recording. Even as we're born, even before we're born, this part is recording before we understand language and before you and I would be able to say this person or this environment is safe or dangerous. Hashem designed it so that this part is actually recording everything. So there's a lot of awareness that we need in order to be able to even be in the game of doing this override. That's why we're even having this conversation, because we are people who have Emunah. That's why we're here. We understand the design of the world, and yet if you're anything like me, anybody like me, you're still struggling. And the struggle is a lot because of these reactions that happen. And what we want to do is to be able to learn how to go from reacting to responding based on our neshama. And that's what we'll talk more about next time. What happens, how come it's difficult, and what we need to be able to do, to be aware of at least, in order to have more of a fighting chance. We deserve it. Okay? Speak to you soon.